What's going on, guys? It is Fox19 here. Welcome back to a brand new video and another episode of the F1 debate for you guys today here on the channel. Today, we're going to be discussing the Belgian Grand Prix. If you guys end up enjoying today's video, feel free to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here as well. And firstly, from me as well, I want to say a massive thank you for all the support that I got on last week's F1 debate video. It was definitely by far my most viewed F1 debate video I think I've ever made, with like over 700 views at this point now, which I never ever get for talking about real life Formula 1. So genuinely from me, thank you so much for the support on that one. I don't expect to get the same amount of response as I did from that video last week, but ultimately if we can get any form of positive response going forward, that'd be absolutely amazing. And if you want to see any more real life Formula 1 content discussion from myself, whether I talk about practice, maybe give my own predictions for races, things like that, let me know. I'm always looking to take on some feedback. So if there's anything that you want to see me do, maybe in the future, like I said, you know, pre-race predictions, so forth, let me know and we can definitely give that a run. But first things first, I want to give a massive congratulations to Mercedes-Benz, the team that I support, hence why I'm repping the shirt, obviously. Because not only did Mercedes-Benz do me a solid and get a victory at the Belgian Grand Prix, they also screwed me over massively and made me look like an absolute knob. So let's start with why why Mercedes made me look like a massive knob. So the biggest thing is, why did Mercedes-Benz make me look like a massive knob? Well, as you can see, I put out on my community page here on my YouTube channel, I put out a post straight after the Grand Prix. You can see here that I'm very happy with quite a stupid selfie, to be honest, but I've obviously got the selfie of the podium with George Russell on the front or the top of the podium, Lewis Hamilton in second, and Oscar Piastri in third. To be honest, probably the nicest podium I could think of, right? And my post was as follows. What a race. Mercedes 1-2. Russell's best ever race in F1. Lewis will be angry as he controlled the race, but George earned that. I'll cover it all in an F1 debate video tomorrow. Now, the only reason that I didn't do an F1 debate video yesterday to upload it straight after the Grand Prix like I've done for the last few races is because I was over my dad's watching the Grand Prix and we had a barbecue afterwards, which was amazing. It was actually probably the best thing that I did that, because it meant that I could cover what's to come later. What I couldn't cover from this post was the fact that George Russell got disqualified from the Belgian Grand Prix. And you guys, with your comments down below, were quick to realise my stupid post and basically had some fun with it. So after my ha, you guys came in hot. Straight away, well, I mean, this one was from Verdi Guy, was actually probably at the same time that the video, that I put the post out, so that's fine. Same with Midnight Wolf Whisperer, same thing. 2024 is going to go down as one of those years. But then Honda Odyssey Type R comes in with, that aged well. And then we've got Class Aviation 512. This aged like expired milk in the summer sun. That's amazing. And then we have another one here. Don't even dare try and make me pronounce that. So I'm just going to give you TAC 2014 at the end of it. Update. So yeah, that happened. So effectively, yeah, that didn't work out well for me. So yeah, that was quite embarrassing to go through. But we'll obviously discuss it in this F1 debate video. But first things first, let's talk about the Grand Prix itself. It was a very good Grand Prix for me. I think a lot of people said it was a bit of a snooze fest at points in the race, which I do understand to an extent, because there was quite a lot of saving the tyres. It was very much a tyre wear trigger happy type of circuit where you push too hard on the tyres, you're going to wear them out. Overheat them, etc. That obviously the temperatures was a lot warmer on the Sunday than it was for the previous few days. Saturday was obviously wet for qualifying, and also there was a lot of issues with dirty air, which drivers were very much struggling with. I think I'm not really sure where it's coming from fully, because not every circuit has been problematic to an extent. Obviously, I know Spa is a difficult circuit, and obviously a lot of teams would have trimmed down their wing levels, which obviously means they're going to be running with less downforce, so in the turbulent wake, they're going to have a lot less grip through the corners compared to what they would before. And of course, we've seen no rule change since 2022, significant ones anyway, to slow down the cars and to basically stop the dirty air from becoming a bigger problem. Because, of course, at the end of 22 into 23, we saw a regulation change to raise the floor edges by 15 millimeters. But since that, we've not had anything significant to actually make changes to that. And then come into 2025, it's only going to get worse because there is no rule change. It's stable. So that's a problem. But I think also it was just naturally harder to overtake. Obviously, they reduced the DRS zone down the Kemmel Straight by 75 meters, which I think worked. I think it was a very good decision to do it. It was too easy to overtake last year. I think it would have been too easy to overtake this year. We got plenty of battles going into the Lecombe chicane. I remember Sargent was able to actually fend off against Tsunoda. Leclerc was able to defend against Oscar Piastri going into their one time around. I think Perez was able to defend against Russell on one of the laps as well. So it was a lot more balanced. I think the problem is if the DRS had been or didn't get decreased in terms of the activation zone, I think it would have made the race, I think drivers would have had an easier time passing, but it would have made it worse as a spectacle for the fans. But as Oscar was saying, clean air was king. You know, you really needed that clean air. And to be honest, it's to be expected. It's so many high-speed corners, and yes, the dirty air effect is going to get worse. So I can kind of see where his point was in that. But ultimately, if you're not in the clean air, then that's your problem. You know, you're the one that needs to manage that. And I mean, Oscar did a good job actually of managing that. But obviously the race and the grid was mixed up. We had the McLarens starting on the third row, I believe. Not quite where I expected them to be. Or was it the second row? Because Norris got P4, didn't he? Or was it Oscar that got P4? One of them got P4 and P6. They were in between Russell, I think. So regardless, they were slightly out of position. Leclerc on pole with Perez on the front row was definitely an out of position front row. First of all, Leclerc in the Ferrari was overachieved all weekend, because I'll talk about that team by team. Sergio Perez, of course, he's been rubbish all season, apart from the first 4 races when the Red Bull car was dominant. Hamilton was probably the sort of, again, he was an outlier starting in third, because on Friday that car was horrific, and yet here in Belgium in the race it was by far the quickest, so that was weird. And obviously we had Verstappen starting down in P11, and obviously at the end of the first lap we saw Verstappen passing both, basically everyone he needed to pass, Albon, Alonso, and I think he had one other driver that he had to overtake in that. As for Leclerc out front, he maintained the lead. Lewis Hamilton made a great start, very aggressive between him and Perez, a bit of wheel banging multiple times actually between them, but it was all fair, and you can take that one. And then Hamilton breezed past Leclerc on lap 3, and you could just tell at that point, it was sort of like, wow, that Mercedes is either one of two things. Number one, the Mercedes is either really, really quick, or number two, Hamilton is trying to do what Verstappen did in Barcelona, which was get on with it, get the lead of the race, get the clean air, and then control it. Manage the tyres, manage the temperatures, and that's exactly what he did. And he actually then eventually broke away from the DRS of Leclerc, and, well, as soon as he broke the DRS from Leclerc, Leclerc never got back into it again. So, credit to Hamilton where it was due on that one. And for the rest of it, I really liked the first into the Grand Prix in particular, because we had the top 4 teams all basically within about 8 to 10 seconds of each other. You know, we had 8 cars in that distance. They were, some were in DRS, some were not. There was a DRS train, completely understandable, yes. But it was really good to see all the cars and all the teams really evenly matched. Like, there was nothing really in between. It was only really in the second phases of the race did we see the sort of race pace from each car sort of come out a lot more. But it was great to see, you know, Hamilton a second and a half or so ahead of Leclerc, a second and a bit ahead of Perez, Piastri, Russell, Sainz, Norris, all in DRS, Verstappen a bit in DRS as well. It was really, really cool to see, and I really enjoyed that. And of course, the pit stops then played out as they did. Hamilton stayed out front, Russell with an amazing one-stop strategy. Obviously, we'll talk about that. And yeah, in all of that, Verstappen ended up extending his lead in the championship. So there you go. It's a damage limitation race for him, but it does him all the world of good, because all he needs to do is beat the driver that's closest to him, and that's Lando Norris. So unfortunately, that's quite a simple thing to do, unfortunately, because Lando's not doing that well at the moment. So it was a very, very entertaining race, and especially the last 5 laps or so was just nail-biting stuff, with Hamilton catching Russell, who was on warm tyres. But Russell was really quick, surprisingly where he needed to be. There was elements on the track where Hamilton was a lot faster. Excuse me, hiccups coming in galore right now. There was elements on the track where Hamilton was a lot faster than Russell, like especially in the Fangio chicane. Lewis was mightily quick versus George Russell. Like that gap was dropping to like 2/10. And when I saw that, I think the first time around, I'm thinking, it's 2/10 here. He can hold that now by using the slipstream with Russell down towards the bus stop chicane, set him up and then go. But when it came to the key traction zones, like the bus stop, like La Source, Russell had him completely covered. And it wasn't like Lewis was disadvantaged in any way. Lewis had the massive advantage. He had a massive tyre advantage. He had the same car, the same tools. He had slipstream and he had DRS. If you go and watch, remember, well, the Charles Leclerc move, Hamilton breezed past Charles Leclerc and they were on the same tyres at the same phase in the race. Again, Lewis could have easily just been pushing much, much harder to get the gap, to get in front and to get the clean air. That could well have been the case. Maybe if Lewis, for example, didn't overtake Leclerc and didn't even get Perez off the line, then the scenario would have been different, where he would have sat back and waited basically for an opportunity to come his way. But you know, that's the needs to must, that's the hindsight side of things. But it was very much, like I said, a DRS affected race with the DRS trains. It was tyre wear effective, but I was absolutely okay with that because it kind of worked. The teams and drivers were still able to battle, and there was a lot of DRS attacks, but again, no clear-cut, boring overtakes. And it was the same further back the field. Like I just mentioned, the Tsunoda Sargent battle, that was quite close. There was a couple that were just like slam dunks. Hamilton versus Leclerc was slam dunk. The Ocon versus Alonso move was a slam dunk. Ocon breezing past Alonso. But there was some good overtakes in some other areas of the track. I know, I think Ocon passed Gasly into La Source, which was, again, a different place to make an overtake. And, of course, when the drivers made their first pit stops, they had to make some overtakes in some other unorthodox locations to get the job done. So it was a good race overall. And, like I said, a nail-biting finish. And when the gap is 1.1 seconds between the top three at the checkered flag, you can't complain. And I think this is now, since the Canadian Grand Prix, there has not been a race where the driver has finished more than the race winner has not had a bigger gap of has not had a gap of over 5 seconds from when winning the Grand Prix, which is mental, absolutely mental. You know, we've had the gap between Hamilton and Piastri, as the actual order was, of 0.6 of a second. Silverstone, when Hamilton won, was 1.5 seconds. Oscar versus Norris was a second and a bit or so. You know, even in Austria, it was about 3 seconds between Russell and Piastri. And Canada was, I think, like 6, 7, I think it was 7 seconds was obviously when we had the last one, which is crazy. And obviously in Spain, it was again 2 seconds, I think it was, between them. So the grid is so close now, and the top fight is just amazing to watch. And I'm so happy that Formula One is back in a great place. Is Verstappen going to win the Drivers' Championship for a 4th year in a row? Yes, he is. Is Red Bull going to win the Constructors' Championship? Not if they change drivers. But it's just great that we have some great competitive racing. Because right now, Red Bull has turned to Brawn from 2009, where they dominated the opening 7 or so races like Brawn did. And then Brawn won 2 more races for the rest of the season, and that was it. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. Obviously, I think it's too little too late in the Drivers' Championship. Like I said, the Constructors is still well and truly on. But that is it for my sort of thoughts on the race. Let's go and talk about team by team. And crucially, we need to start things off with my team, Mercedes-Benz. Why do I do that every time? Yeah, shout out to my team, Petronas, everybody. Shout out to my team, Mercedes-Benz. So it was a 1-2 for about 2 hours before George Russell was disqualified from the race. We'll talk about the disqualification first, and then we'll talk about why, basically, the majority of Mercedes fans are deluded, brainwashed, and stupid, and do not accept this race result and believe Lewis got screwed. And basically, why was it different to Lando Norris's situation at the Hungarian Grand Prix? There was 2 key different reasons. So let's start with the disqualification. Ultimately, it's absolutely fair. It's a slam dunk disqualification. George Russell's car with the minimum weight is 798 kilograms. And that is a complete dry weight. So at that point, basically what it means by a complete dry weight, you guys would have seen it, you would have understood it. Effectively, the car must weigh 798 kilograms with no fuel in the car whatsoever. Now, George Russell's car did weigh 798 kilograms when there was fuel in the car. Take the fuel out of the car and it dropped down to 796.5 kilograms. The big question is, why has that happened? How has it happened? And how have Mercedes made such a key mistake? And crucially, if that's happened to Russell, why has it happened to why hasn't it happened to Lewis Hamilton? Because ultimately, Lewis Hamilton, well, in fact, actually, ultimately, the entire top 10 passed their Parc Fermé checks. It was just George Russell that failed it, and it stopped all the other top 10 cars from having, or teams from having their cars back until they finished checking Russell's car. There's going to be obviously mitigating factors to this. Obviously, I think the key factor is going to be that the mass of the tyre will be a very, very key one. Of course, ultimately, Russell opted to do a one-stop strategy and did 34 laps on a set of hard tyres. So he would have had significant wear compared to everybody else, and obviously the mass of those 4 tyres would have played a factor. Ultimately, as well, there would have been no in-lap. Now, every team would already be aware that there is no in-lap around Spa. So they would have taken that into some form of consideration, because ultimately, they're not going to be able to pick up rubber onto their tyres. However, after doing some research, I did find that if the FIA wanted to, they could weigh the cars with whatever tyres that they wanted, if they fancied it. They could literally say, I don't want these ones with pickup rubber on them. Strap a set of medium tyres on those, just strap a set of new tyres on, and we'll weigh it with that, please. They could do what they want. But ultimately, they would most likely weigh them with the pickup on there, because if you just strapped on a different set of tyres, most likely is you'll find that the tyre itself will be lighter if you weighed it with the ones with pickup versus the ones without. We could be wrong on that, but ultimately, we have to remember that it is literally 1.5 kilograms. No matter what, though, I mean, Mercedes obviously got disqualified, remember, from qualifying at the Brazilian Grand Prix for having 0.0 or 0.2 millimeters too big of a gap in the DRS flap. And obviously, Leclerc and Hamilton got disqualified from the Austrian Grand Prix last year because their planks excessively wore to literally like 0.5 millimeters. That's how clear-cut it is. But ultimately, you've got to praise the FIA, you've got to praise the stewards for making it black and white clear-cut. You break the legal limit, whatever the legal limit may be, you are excluded from the race, your car is illegal. So obviously that would have been probably the main factor as to why George Russell's car was illegal. The second reason could well be that Mercedes did actually bolt on a massive set of upgrades heading into the Spa weekend. They made some changes to the halo by removing the 2 aero flaps on the halo. They changed the floor, specifically the floor edges, and the Venturi tunnels at the front, and the side impact structure, the little bump that they have. It's not really a side impact structure, but they call it the SIS, the sort of little bump that leads the air down into the floor fences from the top end of it. And they also brought a brand new diffuser. Now, these things didn't work on the car on Friday. They experienced just issues with the setup and the balance of the car, and they had bouncing. So they took this off. But why is this different? Well, remember when Mercedes brought the new floor to Miami back many races ago? Once they'd actually used and run that floor, don't forget in the Spanish Grand Prix that Mercedes actually went ahead and brought the same specification floor to Barcelona, but a new lightweight version, which was great. It saves them weight, which obviously makes them quicker. Now, what could have happened is that Mercedes put this new floor on. It might have given them more performance, but maybe it was heavier in weight. Once they then went back to the other one, they obviously may have made a miscalculation as to how light that floor was in comparison, putting it on, and there could have been other things. Setup, floor biased, potentially plank wear, because obviously we saw the cars will always be scratching the ground in Eau Rouge because the car sucks into the little dip into the floor. And even in Blanchimont, if you go back and watch the race on lap 1, the cars are all literally smoking through that corner. So there could be a lot of reasons why he got disqualified from the race. But it was a massive shame for George Russell because ultimately it was the best race of his entire Formula 1 career. He absolutely killed it all race long. I mean, Hamilton did nothing wrong. Let's move to Mercedes now. Hamilton did nothing wrong. He made a brilliant start. He beat Charles Leclerc. He overtook Charles Leclerc then and controlled the race all the way through. He covered off whatever anybody else did, and ultimately he deserved to win the Grand Prix based on the race that he did. But to say that he got robbed and that Mercedes favoured George Russell by doing a one-stop is complete and utter bullshit. Straight away. Like, I try not to swear too much on the F1 debate, but I'm sorry. Like, I'm a Mercedes fan. You could, for God's sake, you can tell that, okay? I'll always rep Mercedes. I might rep a Ferrari But I'll admit it, I will rep Ferrari gear next year because Lewis Hamilton's moving to Ferrari, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to support Mercedes. It just means that I will have more interest in Ferrari because Hamilton's there. Most likely, I'll probably wear a Mercedes shirt with a Ferrari hat. I'll be looking the stupidest person on the planet and will be called a glorious supporter and all that, and I don't care. My team is Mercedes, my driver is Lewis Hamilton, and that's just me as a person. That's who I am. I obviously grew up when I started to understand Formula 1 a lot more. I grew up when Hamilton then came into the fray, and he obviously kick-started it and caught the British, the public eye. So that's how I sort of grew up with Hamilton, following Hamilton, and that's just where I was. People grew up supporting Vettel, Schumacher, Mansell, Senna. You can grow up watching and supporting. New fans now will be looking at Verstappen and going, I love Max, I love Lando. Look at all the gamers out there that, the big, massive YouTubers like Courage or Vicstar or whatever. They're always shouting, go on Lando, go on Quadrant or whatever. They don't really know anything about Formula 1 too much. Obviously, they like the sport, but whenever Lando wins, because he's very much into his gaming and streaming and social media, he's captured that audience, so they like him, and that's just how it is. But me, even as a Mercedes and Hamilton fan, I know full well that they did not screw Lewis over. Ultimately, Hamilton, like I said, Hamilton did everything right. He covered off everybody in the first stint, and in the second stint, he covered everybody off. Ultimately, at this point, Hamilton has gained himself track position over all of his rivals. If any rival now, when Russell was first and Hamilton was second, if anybody wanted to clear-cut beat Mercedes to win the Grand Prix, no matter what, they had to overtake Lewis Hamilton. And Hamilton had the best race pace out of anybody on the field during that day. It was close between him and Piastri, but remember, Hamilton spent 5 laps tucked up behind Russell and lost a second and a half a lap. So there is a difference in terms of race trim there. The thing is, Russell played his strategy beautifully. He was on a 2-stop. He pitted early on the end of lap 10, start of lap 11 to come onto a set of the hard tyres. If Russell pitted when he did, all he's doing, George, is guaranteeing that he finishes in 5th or 6th because he'll get stuck in the DRS train like everybody else, and ultimately it's hard to pass a Red Bull. As you saw, it took Russell quite a while to pass Perez. It would have been hard to pass the McLaren of Norris if Norris undercut him. Then he would have had to pass Charles Leclerc, and then he would have had to try and get past Oscar Piastri if he could close the gap and get there. By leaving George Russell out, it's basically you either go for it or you don't. Ultimately, if Russell pitted, Mercedes are guaranteeing to not basically do anything with Russell. They're not taking a gamble and risking it. By leaving George Russell out, they are risking it. They're saying, do you know what? If our simulations if we pit now, Russell is simulated to finish in 5th because that's where he was on the track. If he stays out in the lead, he is simulated to finish 5th, but there's a difference. He will have older tyres, yes, but Hamilton, Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, all 4 of those cars have to catch him and pass him. And that's a big ask because they were already struggling around this track to overtake and stay with drivers because of the dirty air. And the DRS was less effective. And like I said, it was harder to pass. And Russell's pace was there. So ultimately, Russell called a 1-stop. Mercedes went, do you know what? Let's give it a go. And it worked. Granted, his car was illegal at the end. But this is the difference between the Mercedes strategy and the McLaren strategy, sorry. The McLaren problem was they had a clear 2-stop race. Everyone was on a 2-stop. Nobody could do a 1-stop. But McLaren opted to pit Norris first twice, not giving the preference to their driver, Oscar Piastri. And ultimately, they let Norris undercut Oscar Piastri. And then obviously Norris was told to give the place back, and it took a lot of time. The difference in the Mercedes swing here is the 1-stop is always a risk whatever you take. If Russell's... In Formula 1, you've got to show, as a team, you're willing to take a gamble in the hope that it pays off. Ultimately, like I said, if Mercedes pitted Russell, Mercedes are accepting 5th place. No better than that, because they're all in a DRS train on the same tyres, hard to pass, hard to follow, the cars are so evenly matched. By staying out, they've given themselves an opportunity. That doesn't mean that the opportunity is going to work. It just means the opportunity is there to go, do you know what? Let's leave you out then, because you're now leading this Grand Prix. Maintain your tyres, maintain this, and let's see what you can do. And that is just the symbolisation of how good George Russell run that race. Because I've not really rated him in terms of his tyre wear Like in Imola, for example, he was told to pit again. He's never been that good at tyre management. Hamilton's the master of it. But he showed that he could do what was told of him. The simulations from Mercedes said he'd finish 5th. They said Hamilton would pass him, Piastri would pass him, Leclerc would pass him. They said everyone would pass him still. But by staying out, you give yourself the opportunity. And so be it. Let's say Hamilton did overtake him. Let's say Piastri overtook him. Let's say he just finished in front of Charles Leclerc, right? And he finished on the podium. All right, like I said, we're putting this in an asterisk because he got disqualified. If he did, that's better than where he would have been if he pitted, because he would have just been with everybody else. So it didn't make a difference. It was the right thing to do. Yes, Hamilton will be miffed because George was never in his race and he never was. And ultimately, a strategy that Mercedes had done for one driver has actually turned out to be better than the other driver. But let's not forget that Lewis Hamilton had a 2-stop race. He had much fresher tyres by about 20-odd laps or so, probably, I think, compared to Russell. And he had multiple attempts to pass Russell and didn't make it stick. Russell earned that race win. Hamilton could have had that race win. Hamilton just wasn't able to do it. It's as simple as that. And Mercedes will be fine with that, and Hamilton, I know, will be pissed because, like I said, he controlled the whole race, but ultimately Hamilton's the type of guy, he'll move on from that. The only people that won't move on from that are the brainwashed and deluded Hamilton fans that are just beyond the Richter scale of stupid. And I'll call it out for it, I'm not bothered. Beyond the Richter scale of stupid. Russell earned that Grand Prix, Hamilton earned that Grand Prix, but Russell's strategy, Russell's time management was better than Lewis Hamilton's, and when Hamilton caught him, Hamilton had the tyre advantage, had the slipstream, had the DRS. Yes, they had the same power modes. Yes, they had the same battery deployments, but Russell, crucially, in the traction zones, could actually do a better job than Lewis, and therefore he won the race because of his own skill. End of story. That's my opinion on it anyway. I've rambled on for about 20 minutes about that, so, you know, welcome to the F1 debate where I just ramble. Next up, we're going to talk about Ferrari. Mixed race for them. Charles Leclerc overachieved all weekend long. Just want to give a massive shout out to Charles Leclerc. He did an excellent race. He was brilliant in qualifying. Ferrari got it spot on with the tyres, giving him a fresh set of intermediate tyres right at the very end. Popped it up into seconds, best he could do. Started from pole. He got mugged off by Hamilton at the start of the race, but he held his own all race long beyond that point. Perez wasn't able to catch and pass him. Piastri caught and passed Leclerc, but at the end of in the middle of the final stint. So overall, and he also held off for charging Verstappen and Lando Norris, who, you know, the Ferrari was clearly the 4th fastest car again this weekend. Charles Leclerc just showed his pure talent and speed. I do think that Ferrari in general is getting a little bit better. The problem with Ferrari is they've just hit the stagnant point where they're stuck, they're stable, and whilst they obviously started the season well, they haven't necessarily dropped in terms of getting slower and slower and slow. Well, they have. They are slower, but it's not to the Aston Martin extent, no offense to them, where Aston have brought loads of upgrades and they're just getting slower and other teams are getting quicker. With Ferrari, they've sort of dropped behind the development curve of Mercedes and McLaren, but they're neutralizing that loss again now because they're rectifying it. They obviously had a flaw. They're bouncing too much, but they've managed to find a balance where it's like, right, this has stopped us from bouncing. Now all of a sudden we need to start closing the curve back down again. So credit to them. Sainz, he was quick in the opening stint. He was on the hard tyres, but I think actually they did the strategy wrong for Sainz. I think staying on those hard tyres, he obviously had to stay on them for a long time because he's on the hards, so, you know, he has to run the mediums at some point in the race. What didn't help, of course, is that he went off at the Stavelot corner at some point during his stint, so he lost a good three seconds, I think it was, in that lap, plus then the other bits that he would have lost just from natural tyre offset. So his race was kind of ruined, and also he pitted late for the first stop, lost the 3 seconds, obviously, from the off. Then he pitted late again for the second stop, and the tyre offset basically just left him like 10 seconds back. He was in the mix. I think if he started on the mediums and went medium hard like everybody else, he would have been absolutely fine, but it just didn't work out for him. It's one of those, they tried something and it just didn't work, but they are the 4th fastest team. There's no doubt that Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull are in front of Ferrari, but I think that they're on the path to recover from a fault, but it's going to take time. But ultimately, it's what it is. You know, Mercedes have taken 3 years to get to where they are now. McLaren have taken multiple stabs at it. They were useless in 2022, useless in the second half of 2020. The first half of 2023. Clawed it back. Then in 2024 took a step backwards and then have stepped up. And Mercedes, look at Mercedes. They came into this race with new upgrades. It didn't work. They went back to the old stuff and they won. They obviously did confirm that they found some other pieces which helped, them win the Grand Prix. It wasn't just taking the upgrades off. And I think they're actually going to put them back on Zandvoort. But they found some other mechanical platforms to work on. So it's just a matter of time. As soon as Ferrari can just fine-tune it, and as soon as Ferrari start bringing in upgrades again, because right now they've had to basically take a bit longer to analyse what's not gone well, then they'll be okay. Red Bull. Super quiet one from Red Bull this weekend. Perez, starting on the front row of the grid, had an absolute shocker. That's the end of his career for me at Red Bull. Probably his F1 career in general, to be honest, unless some team hires him for 2025 or 2026 probably now. That was awful from Perez. I mean, it was an elbows out start between him and Hamilton, but he got overtaken by Lewis. He couldn't pass Leclerc, which was a bit of a surprise. He got overtaken by Piastri. He got overtaken by Norris. He got overtaken by Russell. He got passed by Sainz, and he got passed by Verstappen twice. That's not good enough at all. His medium stint was all right. It was nothing special, nothing crazy. But his hard tyre stint, his second pit stop, this is where Red Bull, I think, made the error all weekend, was saving 2 sets of mediums and only having 1 set of hards. It was quite clear that the hard tyre was the best race tyre all weekend long. It just played into its strength with it being a green track and hot weather. It just didn't allow the mediums to run long enough. They just couldn't run them. So the second stint when Perez was on those mediums, it wasn't the right call from the team, and he just dropped back like a stonewall fish. I mean, Russell overtook him and then pulled 1.7 seconds in a lap against him. Verstappen at that point, even when Verstappen passed Perez, he couldn't catch up to Russell. When Verstappen went medium, hard, medium. In fairness to Max, he had a good final stint on the mediums. I genuinely thought that he would have issues with tyre wear at the end, allowing Norris to pass him, but that wasn't the case. So fair play to Verstappen. He did a great job with that one. But overall, it was a bad weekend for Red Bull, and it's now what? What's that, 4 races now? 4 races since Red Bull last won? Jesus Christ. We've had 3 Mercedes victories out of the last 4 races, and a McLaren win. And Verstappen hasn't been on the podium for 2 races. Wow, we really are closing up to them. Or everyone is, to be honest. And that's just how it is. Red Bull's car is not the quickest anymore. That's a fact. And they're now in a real fight. Like I said, they've got the buffer in the Drivers' Championship. They do not have the buffer in the Constructors' Championship, though. So that's going to get close. That's going to get entertaining. And I'm looking forward to it. Speaking of McLaren, it was a tale of 2 halves. Oscar Piastri with a brilliant weekend. He was pretty good in practice. Qualifying was very good. His race pace was great. Like I said, he said, clean air was king. He did his race well. He overtook Perez when he needed to. Took a bit of time, but he did. And then the final part of the race, he overtook Charles Leclerc. Great move from him. Got very close to beating the 2 Mercedes to the line. With no disrespect to Piastri, though, he was never going to win the race on pure merit. That's not right. That's not the word I'm looking for. Piastri was never going to win the race if George Russell let Lewis Hamilton through, because ultimately, even when Piastri overtook Charles Leclerc, Hamilton was pulling away from Piastri and was maintaining the gap at 5.5 to 6 seconds. Obviously, when Hamilton was in the DRS of Russell, Piastri closed right up because Hamilton was gaining a second and a bit of lap, so Piastri would ultimately do that. I don't think the McLaren had the quickest car in the weekend. I genuinely think Mercedes had the fastest car in race trim in Belgium, which is a complete shock to me, but it is what it is. Moving on to Lando Norris, that man's a liability in that car. I'll call it out. I don't even care. That man is a liability because once again, he's had a shocker of a weekend by his own fault. Ultimately, if you're telling me in the Hungarian Grand Prix that he was reluctant to move out of the way for Piastri fairly because he was wanting to get points to close the gap in the championship, then here's the thing. If you're starting 4th or 6th, whatever the position was, 4th or 5th, whatever the position was, your championship rival, who's 70 odd points ahead of that point, starts down in P11, and ultimately the race results come in and Verstappen finishes 4th and you finish 5th, you failed badly. He got a terrible start. He went round his getaway in his second phase was fine, but going into La Source, he just went wide and just ended up going offline and then onto the gravel and lost loads of places. He then had the DRS and made an overtake on Carlos Sainz and outbroke himself, locked up, went off the track. There's another mistake. They left him out too long on his first stint on the mediums. That was a mistake because then it kept him behind Verstappen the whole race long. And he had a chance to overtake Verstappen during one of the stints. I think it was the final stint. And he locked up going into the chicane and lost all of his momentum and time. And he was the closest he'd been, and he probably may have got the job done. So it was just a rubbish weekend from Norris. And it was a race where we knew Verstappen was going to get a penalty. Norris could have capitalised on that, and he didn't. Like, stop being a liability. Stop doing things wrong. Like, this is the problem. I'll give it to Lando. You know, he's not been in a race-winning car or in a high-pressure title battle situation in his career. It's never happened to him. This is the first time it's happened to him. But just look at Oscar Piastri. The guy's calm. The guy's cool. The guy's collected. He carried the McLaren team in the Hungarian Grand Prix by just being better. And then he's carried the team here in Belgium. Now, look, I won't get myself twisted. There have been races where the tails have turned. You know, in Austria, all right, Piastri made the mistake that time, and Norris carried it. Norris was quicker in the Spanish Grand Prix. Norris is ultimately probably a quicker driver, but he's got more experience than Piastri. Obviously, Norris debuting in 2019, Piastri in 2023. There's a big difference there, but ultimately, for me, Piastri is a championship material driver. Norris isn't. Norris is just quick. Norris is just the next Juan Pablo Montoya. He's fast, but he won't win a title. That's what I think of him. He's just not good enough. Like, at this level, you can't, you know, if you see Verstappen, when he entered, that you know when you see a great enter Formula 1. Verstappen entered Formula 1, shocked everybody, jumps in the Red Bull, wins straight away. The first time that he gets himself into a title battle for genuine in 2021, albeit with the stewards' help in the final race, he won the title. And in that title fight, right, there was a lot of times, don't get me wrong, where his moves were over the line. Brazil, Saudi, etc. But when it came to it, he earned that title from the other performances he did in the season. Hamilton deserved to win the title too. Ultimately, for me, 2021, I look at it as Saudi Arabia was the final race of the season. They were level on points, and that's what they deserved to be on. That's just how I look at it. But ultimately, when it comes to controlling and dominating a race, Max can do it. Hamilton entered the sport with prime Fernando Alonso, who was the reigning champion at the time, and beat him. That's just what a genuine champion and a genuine talent does. Lando is not there yet. He can be, and he could easily win a championship. But if you've got the fastest car, you've got to make it count, because you never know when you'll not have the fastest car again. Look at Mercedes, look at Red Bull currently, because obviously they're starting to slip back now. They've had their dominance, they're slipping back. Look at Ferrari. They've had quick cars in the past, they've had titles, everyone wants to join Ferrari, and now they're slipping back. So you never know when you can have a quick car. McLaren could easily put an upgrade on now, and it doesn't work, and they stumble, and they fail, and they drop backwards. It can happen. Look at Aston Martin, for example. So that's kind of what I feel like. So that's kind of where I'm sort of standing at. Now, I actually can't remember the rest of the race results because I was focusing too much on the lead. So I'm now going to inappropriately get my phone up and find out what the classification was so I can remember the rest of the field, because ultimately I have forgotten. So, you know, bear with as I alter my way through here. We're looking at statements. What even was the classification? That I can't even... Here we go. Fantastic. I got it. Don't worry. So, that was obviously the top... You can tell how much of the race was just genuine. This is the great thing, though. The racing right now is between the top four teams, and they're so close and so evenly matched, and so much drama has happened in the last few races, I forgot about the rest of the grid. Whereas in the races at the start of the year in 2024, we had to talk about the rest of the grid, which was races and battles that we weren't too invested in, because it was battles for like P16, P17, which we weren't bothered about. Now we're in the opposite flip, which is amazing. So, the rest of it though, Aston Martin obviously had a decent weekend. I thought Alonso did actually quite well. He got himself P9 and a decent... no, it wasn't. It'd be P8 because this is classification before Russell's disqualification. So, obviously, it was a great race from him. He did very, very well. Same with Ocon. The Alpine, by the way, that Alpine livery was quite nice, actually. I actually very much liked it, the Deadpool Wolverine livery. It was very, very nice. Some upgrades on that car too, and a hella skinny wing from Alpine. But fair play, it worked to them, so you've got to give it to them. Daniel Ricciardo in the RB, picking up some points after Russell's disqualification. Again, a good race from Ricciardo. A bad race from Tsunoda. He started at the back of the grid, but only finished in P17. Yes, he had a 60-place grid penalty and started from Zandvoort, but, you know, he starts last and he finishes in 17th. And, of course, there was a stage in the race when Ricciardo overtook Logan Sargent, and then Tsunoda was right behind Sargent. So they were close to each other on the road. Ricciardo just did a better job in the race, and he'll most likely get that Red Bull seat now. Albon finishing in 13th for Williams. A bit of a shock because they did quite well in practice and they looked competitive. And I think Albon started in the top 10. I think he got P9 in qualifying. So slipping backwards, but ultimately that's just obviously where Williams' race pace was. They were quick in a straight line. They managed to get that back, but they don't have the corner speed in the chassis for that. And also, while I'm doing this F1 debate video, obviously it's been confirmed that Carlos Sainz will be driving for the team in 2025, 2026, and beyond, as they like to say. That's a stellar lineup to have Albon and Sainz there, so fair play. Maybe I might do another F1 debate video next weekend, discussing that in a bit more detail, and maybe you can see that. Maybe there'll be some more driver transfers at that point. Kick Sauber, Joe DNF'd with hydraulic problems, and Bottas finished in 16th. I don't even know if they're going to score a point this season, to be honest, because the problem is you've got the top 4 teams are so competitive. There's only basically 2 spots for a point unless Perez has a stinker or one of them retires. So it's actually really difficult for them to get a point, and I don't think they will. And then Haas were very quiet. Magnussen 15th and Hulkenberg 19th. They didn't really do anything. They weren't impressive. I thought they might be, but they weren't. But, you know, it is what it is to them. But overall, it was a very, very good race. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was obviously very disappointed to see Russell get disqualified and Mercedes lose the 1-2 because obviously I want what's best for the team at the end of the day. And it would have been the first time that 4 teams had a 1-2 finish in the same season since 1960, which would have been an amazing record to break. But it is what it is. I think Mercedes could probably win some more races later on in the season, and who knows now who's the fastest in whatever race, because I was not expecting Merck to be, and they were. But that is it. We've got the summer shut down now, and the next race after this is going to be the Dutch Grand Prix. Verstappen will definitely be the favourite because he's won every single race that's been held at Zandvoort, and obviously it's his home crowd. He'll be pumped up for it. But will he have a new teammate? You'll have to wait and see. But guys, if you have stayed all the way to the end of this, feel free to drop a like, subscribe if you're under as well. And a massive thank you for me for actually staying here to the end. And I will catch you guys for the next F1 debate video very, very soon. And like I said, if you want to see some more live Formula 1 content where I just talk about genuine Formula 1 stuff, like I said, if you want me to do a prediction for each Grand Prix and then react to my predictions after the Grand Prix is finished, etc., you know, just things like that, maybe bring you guys some more with terms of news. I won't be as quick or as, you know, reliable as other sources out there because I have a full-time job, so I can't really, you know, report on it at midday when this site stuff is done, but you get what I mean. But like I said, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys for the next one. Take care all.